AITA for canceling Thanksgiving dinner after my family refused to follow one simple rule. So, for as long as I can remember, I've been the one hosting Thanksgiving. It's kind of become my thing in the family, you know? Every year, I look forward to planning the menu, getting my kitchen prepped, and setting up my home for all my family and loved ones. I genuinely enjoy it, and it's one of those traditions that feels like a cozy blanket for me, just knowing I'll get to cook and bring everyone together for a day filled with good food, laughter, and warmth. But this year, things are different. My youngest child has been struggling with a medical condition that we only recently found out about, and honestly, it's been a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. Every parent fears for their child's health, but when you're suddenly faced with news that flips everything on its head, it's a whole new level of worrying and uncertainty. This condition weakens their immune system, and as much as I want them to live as normally as possible, I can't deny that I'm constantly on edge, trying to shield them from even the smallest risks. What might seem like just a cold or a bug to others has the potential to become something much more serious and even dangerous for my child. Even a few sniffles or a cough could mean days in the hospital or complications we don't even want to think about. It's scary, to be honest, facing a reality where something so ordinary could have such high stakes. So, after a lot of sleepless nights and conversations with our doctor, they advised us to be extremely cautious as we approach cold and flu season. The doctor explained that it isn't about being overly protective or paranoid, but about managing real risks that come with a compromised immune system. I remember feeling overwhelmed, like I was being asked to choose between the world outside and my child's health, and realizing that, of course, I'd do whatever it took to keep them safe. So, with that guidance, I started thinking about Thanksgiving, the holiday I love and look forward to every year. It's always a joyful time filled with food, laughter, and family. I didn't want to cancel it outright, that felt too drastic, but I also didn't want to just ignore the doctor's advice. It's such a hard line to walk, balancing the traditions that mean so much to us with this very real concern hanging over us. Finally, I decided on what I thought was a reasonable approach. I didn't want to come across as alarmist, but I also couldn't risk taking this too lightly. So, I sent a message in our family group chat, carefully wording it to make it as gentle as possible. I simply asked that if anyone felt even a little under the weather, if they had the sniffles or any hint of a cold, they should please skip coming over this year. It wasn't an easy message to send. I wrestled with the wording, not wanting anyone to feel unwelcome or like I was making them prove they were healthy. I even thought to myself, this isn't that big of a deal. Surely they'll understand. In my mind, it was a small thing to ask, just a precaution, really. But I quickly realized I had misjudged how that message would land. The moment I hit send, I watched the little notifications pop up as people started reading it. At first, I saw a few likes, and I felt a little rush of relief, thinking that maybe everyone would just take it in stride. But then the comments started pouring in. My heart sank as I read the responses. Some of my family members didn't take it the way I'd hoped. My aunt was the first to reply with something that felt like a slap. Really, missing Thanksgiving over a small cold? That's a bit much, don't you think? I could almost hear the incredulity in her voice, and it stung. Another cousin chimed in with, if you're that worried, maybe you should wear a mask or something. Why should we all miss out just because someone has the sniffles? That one cut deep. It was as though they were viewing my request as some unreasonable overreach, like I was being dramatic or asking too much. I was honestly taken aback. I mean, I wasn't asking anyone to miss out entirely, just to be cautious. It seemed so simple to me, just a little extra care for one day to make sure we could all enjoy it without that shadow of worrying hanging over us. So, I tried to explain a bit more, to clarify that it wasn't about being paranoid. I wanted them to understand that, for my child, even a small cold could mean serious health complications, that it was different for us now. I tried to be patient, to keep my tone gentle, emphasizing that I wasn't overreacting but rather doing what any parent would do in this situation. I reminded them that, from our perspective, this wasn't just about avoiding a little inconvenience. It was about protecting someone who simply didn't have the luxury of handling illness the way most people could. But then, as if on cue, the jokes started rolling in, almost like they had decided to turn my serious, heartfelt message into some kind of group comedy routine. My uncle, who has always been the one to push buttons and stir things up in the family, sent a message that read, "So, what, if I sneeze, you'll throw me out of the house," followed by a laughing emoji. I could practically hear his laughter through the screen, like this was all one big over-the-top request. Not long after, another cousin chimed in, saying they'd better bring a full quarantine zone just in case, followed by a series of laughing emojis. I watched the messages come through, each one feeling like a tiny jab at something so personal and sensitive for me. They probably thought they were being funny, that it was all in good fun, but as the jokes continued, it felt like they were completely missing the point. Every lighthearted comment, every emoji felt like a brush off of what I tried to communicate so carefully. I could feel my patience thinning, my chest tightening with frustration and a bit of sadness too, knowing that they didn't seem to get it, or worse, they didn't want to. Even so, I took a deep breath and tried to keep calm, telling myself that maybe they were just trying to lighten the mood, even if it was at my expense. I replied again, trying to keep my words straightforward yet firm. I told them that this wasn't some absurd rule or an overreaction, but a necessary precaution. I explained that this wasn't about control or ruining anyone's fun, it was about protecting someone who really, truly needed it. But even as I had said, I could sense the divide. The family chat seemed to split into after that. Some of my relatives jumped in, reassuring me that they understood completely and would gladly do whatever they needed to make sure everyone stayed safe. They offered to get tested beforehand or promised to skip if they felt even the slightest bit off. And that felt like such a relief, a reminder that some people did understand, that this wasn't unreasonable. I was grateful for their support, even if it was just a few of them who spoke up in my favor. But then there were others who still weren't on board, who continued to push back and question my judgment. It honestly started to feel like they were making it about them, as if my simple request was some burden or imposition that they couldn't be bothered with. In those moments, I felt like I was asking them for the impossible, even though all I'd wanted was a small gesture of care. It was baffling, seeing their resistance and realizing how differently we viewed the situation. While I saw it as a matter of safety, of ensuring a healthy, happy holiday for everyone, they seemed to view it as an unreasonable restriction on their freedom to attend Thanksgiving however they wished. It hurt to think that, instead of seeing this as a way to protect my child, some of them saw it as me asking too much, as though a simple precaution was too heavy a price for them to pay. After a while, it just got exhausting. I felt like I was hitting a brick wall, repeating myself over and over, trying to find the right words that would make them understand why this was so important to me. I'd go over it in my mind, crafting replies that were calm and clear, explaining the risks without sounding like I was overreacting, and yet no matter what I said, it just didn't seem to get through. I felt like I was speaking a language they didn't understand, one where words like precaution and vulnerability had lost all meaning. They'd respond with another flippant comment or another solution that felt dismissive and shallow. Like, just let your kids stay in their room or everyone will be fine. It was infuriating to feel like my words held so little weight with people who were supposed to care about us, about my child. And then the thought of Thanksgiving Day itself started to loom over me, heavier and heavier. I could imagine it all too clearly. I'd be watching every guest who walked in, noticing every little sniffle, every subtle cough, wondering if they'd come despite being unwell. Putting my child at risk because they didn't think it was a big deal. The anxiety crept up every time I thought about it, the dread of having to confront someone face to face if they showed up with symptoms. What was I supposed to do? Send them home at the door? How would I even approach that conversation? The idea of having to police my own family, to be the one standing guard against the very people I invited, was just too much. It was a Thanksgiving nightmare in my mind, where every glance, every cough, every casual touch became a moment of stress and fear. My stress levels were already high with everything we're dealing with on a daily basis. The constant vigilance, the extra precautions, it was all exhausting enough without adding a holiday gathering into the mix, one where I'd have to spend the whole day worrying about whether someone would accidentally put my child in harm's way. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a time of comfort and connection, a day when we could all relax together and be grateful for each other. But instead, it was starting to feel like a ticking time bomb, something that could go terribly wrong because someone thought their small cold was harmless. I didn't want to spend the holiday stressed and on edge, unable to enjoy a single moment because I was too busy scanning the room for potential health risks. So, after a lot of back and forth in the chat, I made a decision. I took a deep breath, and I typed out a message that I knew might upset some people, but felt like the only choice that brought me a sense of peace. I told them that I decided to cancel Thanksgiving dinner at my house this year. I tried to phrase it as kindly as I could, saying that I didn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable, or as though they had to jump through hoops just to join us. I didn't want to be the one making Thanksgiving feel tense or restricted. I told them they were more than welcome to gather somewhere else if they wanted to keep the tradition alive, but that, under these circumstances, I just couldn't host. My house had to be a safe space for my child, especially right now. I wasn't willing to compromise on that, not even for one day. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? That once I took myself out of the picture, they'd simply make other plans and move on. But of course, that's not what happened. Within minutes, a new wave of messages flooded in, each one laced with frustration, disappointment, and even anger. Some family members accused me of being too dramatic, saying I was ruining Thanksgiving for everyone over something so minor. My aunt, who had been vocal from the start, was the first to throw out an accusation, telling me that I was overreacting and making this way harder than it needs to be. She even suggested that my child could just stay in another room or something, as if isolating my own child on Thanksgiving was a reasonable solution. That one hit hard, honestly. Her words felt like a slap, like she was dismissing everything I tried to communicate. She knew the challenges we'd been facing, knew that our lives had turned upside down with this diagnosis, and yet, here she was, making it seem like the simplest thing in the world to just put my child in another room while the rest of us enjoyed Thanksgiving together. I felt a lump in my throat as I read her message. I didn't respond, partly because I was getting too emotional and didn't want to say something I'd regret, but also because I just didn't have it in me anymore to keep explaining, to keep justifying why my child's health mattered more to me than a holiday dinner. There were a few family members who really came through for me, though, and those messages felt like a lifeline in the middle of the chaos. They reached out privately, in messages that were quiet and thoughtful, saying that they understood what I was going through. They told me they supported my decision, that they knew how terrifying it must be to feel like my child's health hung in the balance of every little decision. Some of them offered to do whatever was needed to make sure my child was safe, whether that meant getting tested beforehand, or staying home if they had any doubts about their health. A couple of my cousins even went out of their way to remind me that family should be about supporting each other, especially during times like this, and that if a simple change of plans was what I needed to protect my child, then that's what mattered. I honestly can't put into words how much those messages meant to me. In the middle of all the noise and backlash, it was a reminder that there were still people in my corner who got it, who saw the bigger picture. But no matter how grateful I was for that support, the negative comments started to weigh on me more than I wanted to admit. It's strange how one harsh comment can drown out 10 kind ones, but that's exactly how it felt. For every family member who reassured me, there were others who seemed intent on picking apart my decision, questioning my motives, and making me feel like I was overreacting. I couldn't help but replay those comments over and over in my head, the doubts seeping in little by little. I started wondering if I really was going too far, if maybe I'd overstepped by canceling altogether. Was I being too rigid, too protective? Should I have just trusted that everyone would be cautious? The guilt crept in slowly, filling every little crack in my confidence, until I found myself genuinely questioning if I'd made the right call. At moments, I felt almost panicked, wondering if I'd done something that would forever put a wedge between me and my family, all because I couldn't relax or let things slide. What if I had damaged these relationships over something that, to others, might look small or trivial? What if, in my desire to protect my child, I'd pushed everyone else away? It was such a confusing, emotional place to be in, feeling so certain in one moment, only to be plagued by guilt and doubt in the next. I kept replaying different scenarios in my mind, imagining how it might have played out if I'd just kept quiet and let things unfold. Maybe they were right, I thought. Maybe I was blowing things out of proportion. Maybe I should have just hoped for the best and trusted that everything would be fine. But every time I started to sink into that spiral, I had to pull myself back and remember the real reason I made this decision in the first place. This isn't about making a power play or trying to control anyone. It's not about imposing some kind of rule on everyone or setting a standard that's impossible to meet. At the heart of it, This is about my child's health, about doing what I believe is necessary to keep them safe. I didn't make this choice lightly. I made it out of love, out of a fierce need to protect the person who relies on me to keep them safe. And if that means some people see me as unreasonable or overbearing, then maybe that's a price I'm willing to pay. Because, in the end, I have to live with the consequences of my decisions, and I know that if anything happened to my child because I didn't set boundaries, I'd never forgive myself. So here I am, the family villain who ruined Thanksgiving over a small cold, the one who drew a line in the sand and, in their eyes, made a mountain out of a molehill. And as much as it stings to feel like I'm on the outside looking in, like I'm the one who disrupted everything, I keep reminding myself that, at the end of the day, I did what I believed was right. I'd rather deal with a few hurt feelings, even a bit of resentment, than risk my child's health. Even if it means that, in their eyes, I'm the bad guy, I have to stand by my decision. So, AITA. Update. Thanksgiving Day came, and I tried my best to focus on other things. Even though it felt odd not to be bustling around the kitchen like I usually would, the house was quiet, almost eerily so. Normally, the aromas of turkey, stuffing, and pies would be wafting through the rooms, and I'd be running around, checking the oven, setting the table, making sure everything was just right. But this year, with no one coming over, I tried to keep it simple, maybe even have a little peaceful day with just my immediate family. I figured we'd have a small, quiet meal together, something low-key for once, and hopefully, I could let go of the stress that had been building up since I canceled the main event. But then, out of nowhere, I heard the unmistakable sounds of car doors closing. My heart sank as I looked out the window and saw several cars pulling up to the house. One after another, familiar faces stepped out: my aunts, uncles, cousins. Even my uncle who had joked about sneezing his way out of the house. They were all carrying containers, covered dishes, and bags, some balancing casseroles and trays of food as they walked up to the front door. I felt a strange mix of shock and disbelief. I'd been so clear in the group chat, explaining why I couldn't host Thanksgiving this year, why it was important for us to be cautious. I'd even canceled the dinner, as far as I was concerned. So, seeing them all here, dressed in their Thanksgiving best and carrying food as if everything was normal, was surreal. I didn't know whether to feel angry, confused, or maybe just overwhelmed. They barely paused when I opened the door. With cheerful smiles and greetings, they filed in one by one, as if they hadn't even noticed my stunned expression. It was like they were on a mission, carrying on as if they'd been invited, as if I hadn't sent that message at all. Each of them headed straight to the dining room, placing their dishes down on the table, arranging things like it was any other Thanksgiving. They moved around with a sense of purpose, unwrapping bowls, setting out utensils, filling the space with a bustle of activity and chatter. For a second, I just stood there, trying to process what was happening. I'd told them, hadn't I? I'd made it clear. But here they were, in my house, ignoring every bit of caution I'd pleaded for. I could hear them laughing, catching up with each other, talking about the dishes they'd brought. Someone had even brought a turkey and had gone ahead and put it on the table without asking. There was pumpkin pie, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, everything that would have been on the menu if I'd hosted, only now, they brought it all themselves, completely ignoring my request to keep Thanksgiving low-key this year. I couldn't believe it. It was like they'd collectively decided that my home was still the designated spot for Thanksgiving, whether I agreed to it or not. Finally, one of my aunts noticed me standing in the doorway, looking completely dumbfounded. She came over, casually explaining that they hadn't wanted to let a little misunderstanding ruin the holiday. As she put it, they decided that if I wanted to sit out on Thanksgiving, that was my choice, but that didn't mean they had to. They were there to celebrate Thanksgiving for themselves, and they weren't going to let anyone cancel it for them. The message seemed clear. They saw my decision as a personal choice that I'd made for myself, but as far as they were concerned, Thanksgiving was still on, and if I didn't want to join, that was on me. It was a strange and unsettling feeling, standing there in my own home, realizing that my family had taken it upon themselves to carry on with Thanksgiving here whether I liked it or not. I tried to explain, tried to get across why I had canceled in the first place, but they brushed it off with quick reassurances that everything would be fine, that I was overthinking it. They acted like this was just another Thanksgiving, as if I hadn't said a word about my child's health or our need to be careful. I felt a surge of frustration rise up inside me, a mix of anger and helplessness as I watched them continue to set up, arranging the food on the table, pouring drinks, laying out plates and silverware. I could see that I had a choice. I could keep trying to fight them on this, which didn't seem to be going anywhere, or I could just let it go, at least for now. The atmosphere was so strange, cheerful and light for everyone else, tense and confusing for me. They'd made it clear that they weren't leaving, and any protest on my part was either dismissed or ignored. They were in the middle of their celebration, already halfway to Thanksgiving dinner with everything set up, and I was left with the uncomfortable realization that, short of throwing them out, there wasn't much I could do. I felt defeated, like I'd been backed into a corner, my own decisions completely disregarded in favor of their idea of family tradition. So, I reluctantly agreed to join them. I sat down at the table, surrounded by the food they'd brought, trying to let myself get into the spirit even as a mix of emotions churned in the back of my mind. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, at a Thanksgiving dinner I'd tried to cancel, sharing a meal with people who'd gone out of their way to ignore my wishes. It was a strange, surreal experience. I went through the motions, filling my plate, passing dishes around, but there was a lingering sense of unease that I couldn't shake. I watched my relatives laugh, talk, and carry on, oblivious to the tension simmering under the surface, and I wondered if they truly believed this was normal, if they actually thought they were doing the right thing. As dinner went on, I tried my best to be present, to join in the conversations, to smile at the stories being shared. But it felt like I was sitting at a table that didn't belong to me, in a home that had been momentarily taken over. Thanksgiving was happening around me, and I was just a reluctant participant, pulled along by their determination to celebrate no matter what. I could see my child enjoying the food, joining in on the fun, which was a relief in a way, but even that didn't ease the unsettled feeling entirely. It was as if they'd all collectively decided that my boundaries didn't matter, that as long as they wanted Thanksgiving here, that was what was going to happen. I couldn't shake the sense of being dismissed, of having my concerns minimized and pushed aside for the sake of everyone else's holiday. By the end of the evening, I was exhausted, emotionally and physically drained from the strange, uncomfortable experience of hosting a holiday I'd tried so hard to cancel. My family eventually packed up and left, taking their dishes and leftovers with them, as if they'd been at any other Thanksgiving gathering. They gave hugs, said their goodbyes, and went. It was over, just like that, and I was left to process what had just happened, unsure whether to feel grateful, angry, or maybe even a bit betrayed.